Welcome, Kerri Steele. I am so grateful that you are joining us for our first recorded speaker event for our DSRCT group, and hopefully the first of a lot of impactful opportunities to talk with people who have been impacted by DSRCT. So thank you for being here.
You're so welcome. Thanks for inviting me.
If you could just tell the group a little bit about yourself, what you're doing today, and why you are joining us.
Yeah, well, Laura and I met because her son was going through treatment for DSRCT at the same time that my husband was going through treatment. And we were told it was a very rare pediatric cancer. And he was in his early 30s. And we didn't know at that point any other adults who had DSRCT. But being the small community that it was, we found the people and connected and tried to support one another through really, really difficult journey.
Well, thank you so much. I'm really glad that you could speak directly to your experience in the group and connecting with other people, because so many people in this journey, their journey is infinitely changed by the connections they make with other people. And unfortunately, so many never meet anyone else that went through it, and that's what we hope to change. So
yeah, there's real power, I think, in the connection with somebody who's going through what you have been through or are currently going through. And there's just this immediate connection that you really don't need words. You really don't need even to share the same space with each other. It's just our hearts hurt for each other, and we want to do everything we can to support one another because we know how hard it is. So I think it's so beautiful to create a community for these families to come together, not just to get resources, but to encourage one another. And that's something we can do even in the midst of incredible hurt, is encourage, uplift, and support each other in little ways that people who aren't experiencing what we're going through or have gone through really just, they don't know. It's a kind of a shot in the dark. Would this be helpful?
Well, and you've done so many wonderful things in that capacity in the last 10 years. But before we talk about the organization and the ways that you've connected and used your experiences to help others, tell us a little bit about Will's story with DSRCT.
Sure. Well, we had 3 very young children. They were 2, 4, and 6. And we had just moved into our dream home. We were in the process of applying for adoption for a 4th kiddo. And he got the news that he had cancer. Now, that word cancer actually took almost 4 months to come into range. He had an enlarged lymph node in his neck. And because of his age, he was a long distance runner. He ran 13 miles every single morning. He was super healthy. He didn't feel bad. He was working full time, plus being a great dad and husband at home. And they said, you probably just have a clogged lymph node from a virus. And they put him on antibiotics, and that did not clear it up. So they put him on stronger antibiotics, and that did not clear it up. And they said, well, let's try these antibiotics. So 3 rounds of antibiotics for them to finally say, okay, maybe we should take a look at this. Now, because of your age and because of where this lump is, it's probably lymphoma, which is great news. If you're talking about cancer, this is one of the ones we really know how to treat well. And my husband was actually seeing an ENT for this because it was in his throat. And that ENT had interned at or done residency at MD Anderson. So he had a lot of connections down there already. And we're in Frisco, right outside of Dallas. So we're in the Texas area. And he said, let's do a fine needle aspiration and just see what kind of cells are in there. And that came back inconclusive. So then they did a second one. That one came back inconclusive. So then they said, well, it's probably time for us to go in and do a biopsy. So they did that, and surprise, it came back inconclusive. So they went in and did a second biopsy, and they said, we really still don't know what it is. So while we're sending off these samples to the Mayo Clinic, to MD Anderson, to some of these specialty labs, we are just going to move forward with assuming you have cancer of unknown origin. And so let's do a full body PET scan and see if you have anything anywhere else. And that scan came back not good. A lot of the tumors were in the abdomen, so they assumed he had colon cancer. His grandmother had had colon cancer, and because of his age and family history, they said, well, this is most likely the cause. Sent us to go get colonoscopy, and it came back clean. And they said, this is not colon cancer. So they sent us back to cancer of unknown origin, and he and I both sat in that room going, how can you not know? There's got to be an answer. There's got to be something. I don't want to just fill my body with poison in the hopes that it's going to work for some unknown thing. Maybe it's not even cancer, right? Because he was healthy and they couldn't figure out what kind it was. I think in that space, we're really in denial that he had cancer. Maybe 3 weeks after that, we got a phone call from that oncologist, and he said, we got the results back from MD Anderson, and it looks like desmoplastic small round cell tumor. And there really are not a lot of doctors who have any experience with that type of cancer. So I really recommend you get down to MD Anderson. So we called back the ENT and said, hey, I know you have some connections there. How quickly can you get us in? And I don't exactly remember the timeline, but it was in 1 month's time, that we were at MD Anderson with his number, waiting in line for the scans and the tests, and, walking around that gigantic hospital, trying to just comprehend that this was what was happening, and leaving 3 kids at home with family while we went and got the most devastating news we could have ever gotten. You have DSRCT, and it's inoperable because you have hundreds and hundreds of tumors in your abdomen, and we have no idea how you're even walking around and functioning. All of his labs and everything else about him looked perfect. He was like the healthiest cancer patient. They couldn't believe their eyes when they saw him. And he was so great at all of that initial MD Anderson onslaught of information and appointments. And he said, if I can make people smile or laugh today, then that's what I'm going to do. And his goal in everything that he did when he was at MD Anderson was to bring joy to somebody else. That's the kind of man he was.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just so sorry for what your loss, and he was obviously a beautiful person, to have that approach when he had so many things that he had to face. I think from my perspective, there's been kind of a change in the way that people's stories play out in our community because of in our day, most of us didn't get a DSRCT diagnosis the moment that the cancer was discovered, right? Mm-hmm. My son didn't get it until he actually had surgery, and they removed everything and got the pathology back and told us it was a totally different cancer than we did, right? So one thing I do see as a very common experience is nowadays is people are getting diagnosed into the right facilities within weeks or months. When we in our generation didn't even get the correct information. And I think for us, because there were so many unknowns, and maybe for you too, they didn't have any confidence in what they were telling us, which made
Right.
us keep asking questions, right? It made
Yeah.
us keep saying, well, they don't really know, so maybe we should ask someone else also. So we had the benefit of not believing that early on that they had all the answers and seeking answers ourselves. Now that people get diagnosed very quickly, I think there is more of a reliance on, well, just whatever the doctors say, we're going to do that because we've gotten to this diagnosis and they know what to do. I don't think that the options have changed as much and the outcomes have changed as much. It's just that they're getting that news sooner. And I wish more people knew, not in the hard ways that we learned, but in some way, that they only know what they know, right? And your story is a perfect example of that. So tell us a little bit more about your Will's diagnosis and treatment and kind of the impact on the family, and how it went from being inoperable to him having surgery down the road.
Yeah, well, when we had our first meeting with Dr. Ludwig, I'm not sure. I don't even know if he's still there at MD Anderson. He was my husband's assigned oncologist. He said, listen, you might have 6 months to live, and the chemotherapy that we're going to put you on is going to actually make you not want to live. So you should probably decide if you want to do this or not before we get started. And we looked at each other and we were like, what? So to be quite honest with you, we went home saying, no, thank you. And we started diving into the homeopathic route. And we spent the first 6 months hemorrhaging money, quite frankly. We did every homeopathic treatment you could imagine. And his tumors actually stopped growing during that time. They did not shrink, but they did stop growing. And at the end of that 6 months, he said, well, I'm still here, and it hasn't done anything to reverse the cancer, and we cannot afford to keep going with this form of treatment. So what if we do 6 months of chemo, see if we can reverse the cancer? This was the idea that we were toying with, was we do chemo for a while, and then we go back to, we save up money, and then we go back to the homeopathic treatments. So he did phenomenal on the chemo. Obviously, chemo is horrible, and he was very sick. He lost his hair, eyebrows, eyelashes. That was probably one of the most interesting aspects of the kids being young, and they would play with him and they'd have clumps of hair that came out in their hands, and we'd have to have a conversation, or they would say, you look so weird without your eyebrows or your eyelashes. And so it opened conversations that you never think you're going to have with young kids. It was a challenging phase of life, but all of that to say, the tumor shrunk, and they said, we really do believe that you're a candidate for the HIPEC surgery now, but there were no adult surgeons who were doing that. So they referred us to Dr. Hayes Jordan, who is a pediatric surgeon, and so she actually did the HIPEC surgery on Will. She removed 268 tumors, and I think it was a 17 or 18-hour surgery. And we did donate all of the tissue from the tumors that they took for research. And that recovery for him was harder than all of the chemo combined. I do think some of it was because we had done so much chemo that we really didn't give his body any time to rebuild before the surgery. So he decided after HIPEC, which he had several complications from. We were at MD Anderson inpatient for almost 3 months straight because of complications that he had. He decided to take a break from chemo for that little bit of time. And in that few months, he broke his leg. And when they went to go repair it, they said, your bones are so brittle, and we think we found cancer inside your bone. So they started doing bone marrow biopsies, and the cancer they found inside his bones was not anything they had ever seen before. And this is MD Anderson. They said, we don't know if the DSRCT mutated in the bone marrow, or if it was, something else came in contact with it. DSRCT is already a mutation of 2 different types of cancers. We really have no idea. And you've already had all of the chemos that you can have that they give you for DSRCT. He couldn't have those anymore because it was already starting to cause problems with his heart. So we really don't know how to treat you. And we were like, let's try something. We're not ready to give up yet. And he tried, I want to say 2 or 3 rounds, and his body just said, no, we can't do this. He passed away on Christmas Eve of 2012 after 3 years of battling. And he battled. I call it a battle because he did. He fought for his life. He really, really wanted to be here for the kids and for me. And he loved his life. And but he knew where he was going, and he is in the arms of his Savior now, and we'll get to see him again one day.
Well, I think it's important to, see the big picture of the long journey, right? And I often say in the group, like, it's only a long journey if you're lucky, right? Because you have to fight, like you said, for every win. And if you're lucky, that fight keeps going. But at some point, then you kind of get behind in the batting average, and you can't get back up. And I know that I went through that as well. And it's really just an indescribable experience to go through. But if you could try to talk about the impact on you and your kids, you as his caregiver, and I know don't want to talk too much about your now adult beautiful children, but back then, kind of the impact that it had on your life, and how you coped with that.
Yeah, it was a much more difficult journey than I ever could have imagined as being the healthy person, the healthy adult. The caregiver role was almost like being thrown into the fire and being scorched and watching your loved one be hurt worse. Watching them suffer so much was probably the worst part of everything that I went through. I developed an ulcer. I developed anxiety and depression and had to get on some medication for that. It was very difficult to balance. Our home was here in Frisco, and we had 3 young kids, and yet we were constantly traveling to MD Anderson at least once a month. Sometimes 3 weeks out of the month, we were at MD Anderson. And then the 1 week out of the month that we were here, he was in the hospital getting his treatment. So he was in downtown Dallas. My children had a lot of, they were all different ages. So developmentally, they experienced it differently. They understood it differently. And then they all have different personalities. So they expressed it in all sorts of different ways. Very common with, they always had headaches. They never wanted us to leave. When I would drop them off at school, there was severe separation anxiety because they started to realize the pattern of Sometimes somebody else picks us up. Mom and dad aren't always here. Who's going to be home when we get back to the house? So it did create a lot of turmoil in them that they were really too young to be able to put words to. So it came out through tantrums. It came out through body aches. I think they had a stomach ache the entire time their dad was sick, right? It makes sense. There's so much going on and they don't know how to communicate it. And then as a parent, you're sort of in survival mode, right? You're trying to keep everything going, scheduling the appointments, driving to the appointments, cooking the meals, working sometimes, keeping the laundry done. I mean, there's just so much that goes into being a caregiver of whether it's a spouse or a kid. There's one person that typically lands on. And as active as a father he was, he couldn't do a whole lot because of his energy. And then when the kids would get sick, I had to keep them sequestered and, wearing masks and gloves and cleaning everything and trying to keep him healthy and trying to do all of that. It was very difficult. And it took me a while to realize, and some really beautiful friends to realize, how if I don't take care of me, I can't take care of anybody else. And so those moments that felt so selfish for me needing breaks really turned into a beautiful gift that I actually gave my family, even though I felt like I was doing something selfishly for myself. And sometimes it was just walking around the block. Sometimes it was wandering around a bookstore because I love to read, but I could not read. I couldn't remember anything that I read. I would open a book and read the same sentence 3 times and be like, what am I doing? My brain just was not, I didn't have the energy to read. But I found comfort in a bookstore. So I would wander around a bookstore for 20 minutes and be like, okay, I feel like I can breathe again. I'm not holding my breath. Sometimes it was going to a friend's house to have a cup of coffee at her house instead of being at my house or a hospital, just to have a break. So I think because our journey was years long, it did give me the time to start to realize how important self-care was so that I could keep being the caregiver. Because after that first 6 months, I was pretty stressed to the point that I had no patience. I wasn't sleeping. I could barely eat because of the ulcer in my stomach. I mean, it was not a pretty situation. Children, I think, sometimes look very resilient and look like they're handling everything okay. I know now, having adult children and having conversations with them about what it was like for them, I know that it was really, really difficult for them. And because their hearts were to not cause more stress because they could see how much stress we were under, they turned to each other a lot, which is beautiful, right? You want your kids to be friends, but it also put the kids into this mode of being a parentified child. If you like the terminology there, they took on adult roles. They tried to take care of each other. When one of them would get sick or scared at night, they would go to a sibling instead of coming to us. And I didn't know that in that phase of life. I didn't know to warn them not to do that or build those lines of communication and trust with them that God has equipped me to care for you, even in the midst of this. So please bring me your pain. And so as teenagers and adults now, I've got 18, 20, and 22. We're just coming out of those teenage years and into young adulthood. We're able to have some really beautiful and meaningful conversations around it. And I think some healing in their hearts as well. But I think it's going to be a process and a journey, because that was a very traumatic thing for them to see, and a lot of loss for them in a very different way. They lost a father. I lost a husband. And so they have a different grief journey than I had. And because developmentally, kids reprocess their grief at every developmental stage. The younger that they are, the more developmental stages they have to go through, and that they will reprocess it.
I think I'm really excited for you to talk about the work that you've done with Little Hearts of Hope, because I think one of the things that struck me the most in listening to your prior podcast that I heard you on was that just you have such great language about the emotional coping of this experience. I think for me, just finding ways to talk about it in a healthy way with my child was such a huge challenge in this journey.
Sure.
And so I think that you have so much wisdom and so much like love. You can see the love for your children that drove you to find ways to better help them cope with this. And I think that's really beautiful. I know that so many people in our group that have small children, there's no, whether you're a parent with children or whether you're the patient as a child, there is no rule book on how to do this.
Yeah, there are no manuals.
So you're just figuring it out as you go, while simultaneously keeping all the balls in the air and your head above water, while trying to tread water. It's quite a lot all at one time, and the impact. I had health issues and mental health issues resulting from my years of fight, right? And I think a big important message that as hard as it is to not focus on the person with cancer because of how absolutely awful everything they're going through is, and how they should be the focus in so many ways, but it's easy to only focus on their needs and their care and neglect the whole rest of the family while we're trying to fight this cancer. And you and I can both say from retrospect that there is a cost for everyone involved, right?
Yeah, that's so true. And, one of the things that Will was so good at was, Kerri, you go take some time. Like, I'll be okay. Like, go take 2 hours, go take 20 minutes, whatever window of time we had. He's like, please go do something for you. He could recognize it. And, he was the one going through cancer. But kids are so intuitive. And as adults, we really, really want to protect our kids from hurt. That is a normal and beautiful instinct that we have as parents, right? But when cancer comes into your world, you can no longer protect them from that. And so now you have to step into, how do I navigate it with them? And it's super important to remember you're not just navigating it with the child who has cancer or the spouse that has cancer. You're navigating it with the entire family. And the closer you are, I saw a diagram one time, it was a circle, and you've got the person who has cancer is in the center of the circle, and then the spouse or the kids that are living with that person, then that's the next circle, and then the parents and siblings of that person, if they live outside of the house, and so on. And while this ball is like revolving around the person who is sick, the people who are on that outside circle, they're spinning too. And so there needs to be care for them. And with kids, it's quite easy to give them some dedicated, focused attention. And it doesn't even have to be a lot. It can be 10 minutes a day. It can be 20 minutes a day, just for them to know, hey, they still see me. Hey, I'm still important. Hey, I'm still a part of this family that deserves love and attention. And kids are egocentric too. So it's normal and healthy for them to be like, hey, what about me? And to have their feelings hurt when it can't be. And we know sometimes it can't be. There are emergencies, there are surgeries, there are infusions, like all these things have to happen for the sick person. And so to make it a little bit of a priority to do check-ins with those kids, and to, as the parent, know how to preemptively discuss some things that might be happening in age appropriate ways. We don't want to scare them, but the more that we can build trust and open those lines of communication, our kids are going to reciprocate that back to us. So we have to teach them how to do that. We can't teach them how to do that unless somebody taught us how to do that. So we have to get, just like self-care with taking a break, we have to do self-care for processing our own emotions and learning how to do it in a way that is helpful and not hurtful. Because so often we just try and shove it down because we're trying to keep all the balls in the air, and we can't, because it's too much and it's too hard, and it comes spewing out in lots of really ugly ways that we don't want to yell at our kids. We don't want to snap at our kids or our spouse. We want to be there for them. That's our heart. And so finding ways to process that stuff for ourselves, I think, is super important. And for me, it really just started with, instead of telling myself I needed to do this, or I needed to feel this, or I needed to stop feeling this, it was, okay, this is what I'm feeling. Makes sense that I'm feeling that. This is a horrible situation. Okay, who could I talk to about it? What would make me feel better in this moment? Was it journaling? Was it running? Was it calling a friend? Was it sitting down in prayer? Not anything that would take a terribly long amount of time, but just to take care of myself before I tried to take care of my kids. And then when you're walking with the kids, to not be afraid to introduce them to something that they haven't brought to you. So in Little Hearts of Hope, one of the things that our packages that we send out to these families, every package focuses on a different emotion. Well, one of the emotions that really surprises parents when they get the package is the jealousy. Why would my kid be jealous of their sick dad or their sick sibling? This person feels horrible. They feel jealous not for the illness, they feel jealous for the attention, they feel jealous for the care, or false guilt. A lot of kids, because they're egocentric, tend to think, maybe I did something that caused this, or maybe I can do something to fix this. And there's a lot of false guilt that they hold about them not being able to do something to help their sibling or their parent. It's a confusing little mind in their world, but if we can just remember that they don't have the vocabulary for this stuff. This is probably the first time anything like this has happened to them. And we want to learn how to walk with our kids through this, because we can't shield them from it. It has happened to our home. They know something's going on. And when they can feel something is off and nobody's talking to them about it, it makes them create things in their own mind, and it breaks trust between the child and the parent. And so we have to be brave. And it's much easier to be brave and have those hard conversations if we're taking care of ourselves first and letting ourselves process what we're going through.
That is probably one of the most important pieces of advice, I think, just looking back on my own journey and the impact, the now grown children that were, I don't have other children, but Cole had a half sibling. He had cousins that were very close, like siblings.
Mm-hmm.
And seeing the impact in their life as they've grown up, and the ways that they've struggled in grief, and how losing him impacted them. I wish I would have heard what you're saying 15 years ago, because I didn't know.
Yeah.
I didn't know that all of us were going to be stamped.
Yeah.
Forever.
Yeah. I have grown adults who come up to me in the business world. I do a lot of networking to try and get businesses to partner with us to sponsor packages. And at least every 3 months, I will have a grown adult who will come up to me after an event crying his or her eyes out and say, my sister, my mom, my dad died when I was 6, when I was 11, whatever, when I was a kid. And nobody ever talked to me about it. I wish this had been around when I was a kid. I think this would have helped me so much. And so many of them, I'm like, listen, we can't change the past, but we can heal now. I'd love for you to go get some therapy. It's not for me. I'm not a therapist. So let's I can't take care of you in this moment. But please go see a therapist, because there is healing that needs to happen. We do have to address those traumas in ourselves to be able to be that strong landing point for our kids.
Well, and you may not be a therapist, but you have such a therapeutic message. And I feel like for people who are going through this, without having a guidebook or an instruction manual on what to do, you have provided such a comprehensive perspective from really a mental health perspective, an emotional health perspective. And what I keep hearing you say is, like, we have to give them language and coping skills, right? They're not going to have the language or the coping skills if we don't try to give that to them.
Yeah, none of us are bought or are born with those coping skills. We are born with emotions, but we're not taught what to do with them. And as adults, most of us were not taught either. So we have to really step into that for ourselves so that we can step into that for our kids. And, I tell families all the time, you can't take this pain away from your kid, but you can walk with them through it with holding hands or your arms around each other. And I know for me, so many times the most healing thing was not when somebody had the right thing to say, or they brought over the best meal, or, did whatever. It was when somebody was willing to sit with me, listen to me cry, hand me Kleenex when I was hysterical. It's just being together and being with someone and loving them through that with your presence. And so that's what we can offer our kids. We can't take away the pain of this. It's going to be what it's going to be. That person who has cancer is going to be healed, or they're not going to be healed this side of heaven. And so we have to figure out how are we going to get through this together as a family. And the work that I did reach out to a social worker from hospice that worked with kids. I reached out to a play therapist. I reached out to an elementary school teacher. And I reached out to a nonprofit that had tried to do anticipatory grief support groups, but couldn't. That's a hard season in people's lives. So they couldn't really get people to commit to coming or show up. And so in talking with all of them, I just said, hey, how can we help families? I'm not a therapist. I'm not offering therapy. These families can't come to another place. We can't give them one more thing, one more place to be, one more disappointment for kids to not get to do something they wanted to do. And so we decided we're just going to mail kits to their houses. We're going to send them everything that they need and teach parents how to process these particular emotions and how to talk to kids about them. We give them everything they need to do a play-based activity together and an art-based activity together, because kids love play and art. It's a great way to connect with them where it doesn't feel scary. You're not sitting down and say, hey, let's talk about this. It's done through play. And so it kind of takes that scariness away for talking to kids about it. And it's a launching pad. It's like, hey, get creative. Your kid might really be struggling with this this month, And then next month, your other kid is struggling with it. And so you learn these skills, you learn these vocabulary, you learn how to connect with your kids in the midst of trauma in a way that isn't sucking more energy out of you. It's actually connecting, which fills you and your kids.
Well, I think we kind of naturally segued into you talking about Little Hearts of Hope and how you took your experience and your pain and what you learned, and you got help and information so that you could create resources and kind of create a roadmap for families who are navigating this time. And I think the work your organization does, you did it in a really intentional way, like you said, and you didn't want to burden people with another time commitment. And I think that kind of what you're saying is you recognize that not a lot of people have these tools, and you created the toolkit, and that's remarkable. And a beautiful thing that you've created the toolkit that you needed for others. And so maybe you can tell us about Little Hearts of Hope and how it started, and the work that you've been doing.
Sure. I actually had no intention to go into the nonprofit sector. What I wanted to do was to create something that would have helped my family and then give it to a nonprofit that was already in existence and say, hey, you guys should add caregiver support and support to kids in the home. And there was a nonprofit that loved the idea, asked me to join. And then within a couple of months, they were like, oh my gosh, we had no idea how many people were fighting cancer with kids in the home. I think this might be its own nonprofit. We're going to help you set it up. And I said, no, thank you. I need a real job. I need some medical benefits and a 401k. And I've got 3 kids I've got to take care of. But the Lord had given me that vision during a week when I had spent praying and fasting. And so I knew that it was something that was going to be powerful and impactful. And I didn't want to let it go. So I said yes. And in August of 2014, we opened our doors to start serving families and started shipping them. I think we had 32 families our first year. And those families ended up telling other families. And we just ran some numbers today. We've served 220 kids this past year.
Amazing.
All over the country. And what we do is every month, the family gets a package. Each kid in the home gets their own package, because I know kids don't like to share. They want their own markers. They want their own balloons. So every kid gets their own package. And we've had big families. We've had a family of 8 before in our program. They all got their own packages. And it gives the kids something to look forward to. So it comes in these bright purple envelopes. Our first package is really a welcome to the program. We're going to be talking about feelings, and we're going to be naming them. So here's some emotional vocabulary to start with. And then our second package is we feel our emotions. So let's start understanding where we might feel our emotions in our body and connecting them to those vocabulary words that we first learned in month 1, to start getting some fine-tuning some of that more than just happy and sad. And so then every package after that, the next 10 packages focus on a different emotion. So like I mentioned before, we have jealousy, we have false guilt, we have abandonment, we have loneliness, we have sadness, anxiety, anger. Embarrassment is another one that people are surprised. It's hard for kids to see their loved one change so physically much. Anyway, we have 10 different emotions, and every package contains a play-based activity and an art-based activity. And there's a letter in there to the parents about the way that worked in my family, a story of how that happened, how that came about. And then we we are a faith-based organization, so we share scripture in that parent letter. The parents can decide whether they share that with their kids or not, but we really, really highlight that we are all born with the gift of emotions. That's how we were created. Emotions in themselves are not good or bad. They're a part of all of us. And so those verses talk about those different emotions throughout scripture. And then we have a goodbye package where we send every child in our program a Bible that has all of the verses that have been prayed for them. All of those verses are highlighted. And we have a prayer team of over 100 people who pray over our families every single day. When our families send in special prayer requests, that goes out to our prayer team. And so it is just a reminder to say, hey, you are not alone. These feelings have been felt by people for all of time. And there's nothing wrong with having these feelings. Let's learn some healthy ways to deal with them. And that's what our program is. We do send Christmas gifts when we get grants to fund those Christmas gifts. And we've been fortunate the last few years to be able to do that. And we now have a newsletter that we're putting out for people to share their stories. So just like you and I are sitting here sharing our story, there's healing in that. There's power in that. When you can encourage somebody else who is maybe a little behind the journey that you have already walked, it's helpful. And it's helpful for somebody else, but it's also helpful for ourselves because it brings healing when we can share our story and talk about our loved one. And so we have a newsletter. People can submit their own stories as long as it is encouraging to other people. It'll be featured in one of our quarterly newsletters, and that goes out to I think it's over 1,200 people now who are reading our newsletters every month. And it gets put on our website, and we highlight it on all of our social media platforms. We also believe that art is healing and being creative is healing. So we host a virtual art gallery on our website. People can submit their artwork every summer. And we do turn that into a fundraiser where people can vote on it, and we turn it into a calendar, and we mail out hundreds of calendars all over the country too, which is so much fun for me. I love, love, love seeing everybody who submits their artwork and just encouraging them, and doesn't have to look a certain way, just being creative. There's beauty in that.
You have such beautiful programming, and you do so many different things. Do you have a team of people? How did you do this? Did you do it alone?
Yeah, well, of course, I mean, to be a 501c3, you have to have a board of directors. So I have tremendous people who have been with me for years and years, and continue to bring new people on who love the mission. So I do have a board of directors, and then we have volunteers from all over the place who help us create events, to put our packages together, to shipping out our packages, helping us with fundraising, because we can't do any of this without money. So we don't charge our families anything for these kits. And so we are 100% donor funded. And so helping us find grants, helping us host fundraisers, helping us host supply drives in their businesses or with their neighbors or family members. There's too many people to count. It takes a massive amount of people to make this work.
But if there are someone in our community, whether current or bereaved, that might be called by your mission and interested in being a volunteer, is that something that they could help with?
Yeah. There are so many ways to get connected. Just shoot me an email. My information is all over the website. You can go to How to Help, and there's a list of ways to get connected to some projects, and all of those emails come directly to me. So I would love to get back in touch with them.
Well, I really think that there's lots of opportunities for people to do something with their experience to help someone else. And you use the same kind of terminology I use of giving purpose to your pain.
Yeah.
How do you feel like, as hard as it is to create what you've created, and as much work as it is to keep it going, how do you feel like that has helped with you and your children in your healing and your grief since losing your husband?
Yeah, what's interesting is so many people who were close to me when I said that I was going to do this they had a lot of negative feelings about it. They're like, you really shouldn't be working with families with cancer. It's going to re-traumatize you. It's going to be so hard for you. And I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that God was calling me to this work. So I knew that he would equip me for what I needed to do. And what I have found has been the exact opposite of what all those people were afraid would happen. I have found that it has brought so much joy and so much healing to my own heart. I use exactly those words. I get to see a purpose for this pain this side of heaven, and not everybody does. And I don't take it for granted. And it brings me a tremendous amount of joy day in and day out, especially when the days are hard. It's so easy to come back to this place of, I get to help people. And watching how my husband served people, even in the midst of illness, gives me the strength to say, I don't have anything wrong with me. I'm just tired, or I'm just grumpy. I find strength from him, this many years down the road. I love what I do. I'm humbled and grateful every single day that I get to do what I do. And I'm brought to tears at least once a week by somebody letting me know just how helpful the work that we're putting out there has been for them. So I will do this for as long as God keeps funding it.
So do you have any, you do so many programs already, do you have any hopes for the future of Little Hearts of Hope? What's coming for your organization?
Yeah, well, I got to speak with a really incredible woman named Sam. She's up in Canada, and we had a great conversation on her podcast. And she said there are no organizations supporting siblings up in Canada, and she would really love for us to expand our program up there. We also are about halfway translated into Spanish. So as soon as we can get all of our program translated into Spanish, and we can hire someone who speaks Spanish fluently to be able to answer those emails and those phone calls and share resources with those families that only speak Spanish, that is another goal of ours. I'm a part of a newly launched coalition, the North Texas Childhood Cancer Coalition. So we are creating some amazing things in this group of powerhouse nonprofits who are supporting families in pediatric cancer. So I'm excited to see what kind of programming we can put out to really support our families and educate our families in the DFW area. And then finding more ways to let people know that we are a free resource. Like, we want to serve you. We just don't have the marketing money to let you know we're out there. So opportunities like this are tremendous to just help us spread the word to be able to be a free resource for families. So thanks for the opportunity.
Well, I definitely pass on Little Hearts of Hope to anyone with children that I can think of that might benefit from that support. I think you have an amazing program. You have an incredible faith, and a beautiful perspective that is so inspiring to me, and I'm sure to everyone else that's going to get to hear this. Before we kind of wrap it up, maybe you can just give me a brief, what is your hope for our DSRCT community in 2026?
Yeah, well, I first want to say thank you for your kind words. It was hard fought. I fought for this faith. I fought for this life. I fought for every single thing that I have had to do since that word cancer came into our family. So I don't want families to feel less than if they're not in a place where they can see the beauty, where they can appreciate the different things that time and perspective and years of fighting have brought me to. It's okay wherever you're at. It's okay to be there. You won't be there forever. And so I just wanted to lay that out. And now I'm forgetting what you asked me.
What is your hope for the DSRCT community?
Well, first of all, my hope is for a cure. I think enough of us have donated tissue samples that we should have a cure by now. But I hope that the community is able to really connect and encourage each other, because it is it's a close-knit community, and it's so easy to isolate when you're in that survival mode and you have so many balls in the air and you're fighting so many battles. It's so easy to isolate and to shut down. And I really, truly hope that this community that you're building, that it really helps to bring people in and they just feel warm arms around them, and that they can get through this because they've got a friend that they can call that knows what they're going through.
It really just makes such a difference in your journey, who's walking it with you and having that support. And I'm so excited to show this to the group next week. We have people from all backgrounds, but I think every single person that hears your story and your message can get something really beautiful out of it. So thank you so much for giving me your time. And